Yesterday, of course, the limit on attendances at outdoor public events was lifted. The remaining statutory measures introduced in response to Omicron are as follows: limits on attendance at indoor public events, the requirement for 1 metre physical distancing between different groups in indoor public places, the requirement for table service in hospitality premises serving alcohol on the premises, and the closure of nightclubs. Given the improving situation, and as I said last week, we hoped to be able to do, I can confirm today that all of these measures will be lifted from next Monday, 24th January. We will also, from Monday, remove the guidance advising adults against non-professional indoor contact sports so that these can resume as normal. And from Monday, we will also lift the guidance asking people to stick to a 3-household limit on indoor gatherings. However, it is important, I think, to stress this point. Notwithstanding the improving situation, the level of COVID infection circulating in the community is still high. So, to minimise the risk of getting the virus, it would be sensible for all of us to remain cautious in our social interactions at this stage. Even though from Monday we will no longer recommend a fixed upper limit on numbers of households, if we all continue to keep gatherings as small as our circumstances allow for now, I would suggest until the end of this month, we will reduce our chances of getting infected. And of course, we should continue to take lateral flow tests before meeting up with people from other households. Please also remember to record test results, whether positive or negative, through the UK Government website. Let me stress this is even more important now that we are no longer advising confirmatory PCR tests for those without symptoms who test positive through lateral flow devices. Recording these results ensures that we are able to make better assessments of the trends in infection. Finally, Presiding Officer, we will continue to ask people to work from home whenever possible at this stage and for employers to facilitate this. However, we will engage with business now about a return to a more hybrid approach from the start of February. The baseline mitigation measures that were in place before Omicron and the requirement for businesses, service providers and places of worship to take reasonable measures to minimise the spread of COVID on their premises will be retained at this stage to help keep COVID contained as this wave recedes. That means face coverings should still be worn, must still be worn in public indoor settings and on public transport. Businesses and other organisations should continue to have regard to guidance and take reasonable steps to minimise the spread of COVID. And hospitality premises should continue to collect contact details for customers, which is, of course, important for the effective operation of Test and Protect. In addition, the COVID certification scheme will continue to apply for now to large indoor and outdoor events and to late-night venues, all settings where transmission risks can be higher. As of yesterday, guidance stipulates that organisers of events with 1,000 or more in attendance should check the certification status of at least 50% of attendees or 1,000 people, whichever is higher. Now, I indicated last week that Cabinet would consider and decide today whether or not to extend the certification scheme to other premises, such as licensed hospitality venues. This was undoubtedly the most difficult decision we faced this morning, and yet again, the judgment we have arrived at was finely balanced. On the one hand, extending COVID certification could offer public health benefits, ensuring that people attending certain venues are vaccinated or tested. It reduces to some extent the risks of transmission and also the risk of serious illness should an individual contract the virus in one of these settings. On the other hand, we understand that extending certification could create additional costs for businesses at an already very challenging time, and of course the smaller the business, the more difficult these costs can be to bear. So the task for Cabinet today was to weigh these considerations and decide what, in the current circumstances, would be proportionate. Given that cases are now falling quite rapidly and the current wave is receding, we decided that we will not, at this stage, extend the COVID certification scheme to other premises. We will, of course, reconsider this should circumstances and therefore the balance of judgment change in any significant way. If cases were to start to rise very sharply again, extension of certification may well be a more proportionate alternative to other more restrictive measures. However, our conclusion today, given the improving situation, is that extending certification would not be proportionate at this stage. There is, though, one reasonably minor change to the certification regulations that we will propose. At the moment, nightclubs and other late-night venues must apply the scheme if they have in use a designated area for dancing. We intend to amend the definition here to provide greater clarity and prevent premises from avoiding certification simply by having tables on a dance floor and therefore claiming it's not a dance floor but nevertheless permitting dancing to take place. This change will take effect from Monday when late-night venues are able to reopen. Finally, Presiding Officer, let me say a few words about the updated rules on self-isolation after a positive COVID test. These rules, confirmed 2 weeks ago, remain in place. If you test positive, you will be advised to self-isolate for 10 days. However, if you don't have a fever and you take 2 negative lateral flow tests more than 24 hours apart on day 6 and day 7, you can end self-isolation on day 7. Last week, the UK Government announced further changes to self-isolation for England. This was publicised as allowing people to end self-isolation after day 5. Essentially, however, this change simply brings England's rules into line with those already in force in Scotland. This is because in Scotland we count the day of a positive test as day 1 of isolation. In England, this is counted as day 0. In addition, in England you can end self-isolation after day 5. In Scotland, you can end it on day 7. So the slightly different ways of defining the beginning and the end of the self-isolation period has given the impression of difference. But the substance, the period people are actually required to self-isolate for, is in fact the same in Scotland and in England. And I think it's important that people are clear about that. Presiding Officer, the lifting from Monday of the protections introduced in response to Omicron is possible in part because of the efforts everyone has made, voluntarily and as a result of guidance and statutory measures, to help stem transmission. And I want to put on record again today my thanks to people across the country.